Hello and welcome to this episode of the Music City Mindset. We've got a great episode for you today, and if you like this and you want to go back and listen to other ones, we are under everything Nashville Fit. We are under the Nashville Fit Magazine Network. So wherever you listen or watch your podcast, go there, type in Nashville Fit Magazine, and go down and you will see me and Deon's faces, and click on that and follow along. Part of what makes this episode so good is this episode is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. They have now getting away from coffee and making available energy drinks. This one is Project Mango, 200 milligrams of caffeine, great flavors, veteran-owned company, so you definitely want to go out and support that. Check them out. The other part of what makes this episode so great is that I've got my co-host back. Missed you, big dog. Glencliff great, TSU legend, coach and trainer at Training Corner on Instagram, Deon Giddens. Welcome back, buddy.
My God, man. Good to see you too, man.
Yeah.
Back at it.
Back at it.
Yeah. Missed you last week.
Yeah, it was. I didn't realize how much I lean on you for your reactions and things like that.
I hated to miss it, man, but I know you held it down for us, though.
I did what I could. Hey, so we were texting a little bit over the weekend. You got out and about?
I did.
Where'd you end up going? What was your favorite bite, favorite drink? What'd you do?
I ended up going to a couple of spots, man. My wife wanted some, well, she didn't know I was taking it out first, so
okay.
I took out, had to drop the kid off type of situation. So I dropped the kid off, man, got a drink at West End on Bricktops first.
Okay.
Grab a bite there, then went to Maggiano's, got some good pasta, more drinks, and then end up going downtown, which I try to steer away from.
Same.
But, went to 12 South, though. They're doing a lot on 12 South.
Yeah.
So we just hit a couple spots over there, had some drinks, picked up the little one, and took it on home, man. Yeah, good parents' night out. That's what I call it. Yeah.
Now, you don't have to get into details like people start judging how you do your marriage or whatever, but I'm getting whether it's in or out, y'all have regular date nights, time for each other, things like that.
I'm trying to get back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife has been on my head about not doing the date night thing.
But I think we've established you eat and drink a little bit better than I do.
Mm-hmm.
So my question for you is, when you go out, go out on the town, eat foods you don't normally eat, drink things like that, obviously that far outweighs being able to spend some quality time with your lady.
Right.
You know, but how does that feel? Does it feel like it throws off your routine?
Going out to eat like that?
Yeah, going out to eat, like
my personal routine.
Yeah, your personal routine, your like digestion, all that. Obviously, you're not going to ever not do that because you want to spend time with her.
Right.
But like, that's not something that you normally do, like going out, having a bunch of drinks and things like that. So like, how much does that throw it off? How do you get back on track?
Oh man, it's I've had times where it's thrown me completely off, but I've learned though, right? So, fried foods I cannot overindulge in fried stuff.
Okay.
My body will reject it. Cannot do it. So sorry for Nashville hot chicken. I know we're in Nashville, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
But any type of tacos. I'm a pizza guy, so I love pizza.
Yeah. Same.
I can kill those. My Modelo's. Keep it smooth on the beer. Maybe some wine. If I do drink tequila, though, you know what I mean? Tequila. Yeah. So I have a margarita too. But if you're really feeling kind of crazy, maybe we'll take some shots. Tequila shots.
Okay, I'm about that.
I'll give you my non-alcoholic beverage pitch here a little bit later.
Yeah. But
there's a lot going on there. It's good for this kind of situation.
But once again, I can't do it like that anymore. So this past weekend was chill. I can't do it. My body rejects it. So to my point, the way I get over, I still go get a workout.
Like the next day?
Or take a walk, do something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So now my body's kind of resetting. By Monday, I'm back at it again. Worked out this morning, had 6 a.m. sessions. I've been rolling all day. So I feel
But that
good.
was because of the movement you did on Sunday after going out on Saturday.
Even try to get the workout in on Saturday, the day of I know I'm getting out.
Yeah.
I still work out that morning.
Okay.
No matter what. Yeah.
So day of before and the day after, you got to get moving.
No matter what it is, 30 minutes. I said 30 seconds. 30 minute move. No matter what you do. Helps me out.
Just about sweating it out. And
That's
it.
I'm a big believer in sweating it out.
If there's only a place you could go.
We have places to go.
Seamless transition from the podcast. Guys.
Hey, see how good I'm getting? So segue back into this. If you want to learn more about how you could sweat it out, do you mind if I introduce our guest now?
I want him. He's going to help us out, man. He's going to help y'all out, too.
The man sitting on this couch with me, he is a Lexington, Kentucky native. He's lived in Chicago, but also Singapore and Hong Kong. So we're going to talk about that. He was the president and COO of the company Ready, the head of Uber in China, the VP of Global Operations of Uber Eats. He's traveled to all 7 continents. He's an Ironman competitor, founder of Framework right here in Wedgwood, Houston. Welcome to the show, Mr. Allen Penn.
Thank you, sir.
Man, that's a lofty list, right?
Yeah. That's you start going down that list. It's like, damn. Yeah. Lexington.
Yeah, man.
Grew up Wildcats fan.
Absolutely.
What was?
He had to be a Wildcat.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So what was Lexington like? Your upbringing like in Kentucky?
I grew up on a farm, so you learn early to wake up early and not be afraid of a little dirt and a little work. So I think that's one of the benefits of that lifestyle. But yeah, to your point, grew up a Cats fan. There's no professional sports in the state of Kentucky, and so I think that's the reason that college, in particular basketball, mostly because the football team wasn't very good, but but college sports is so big because that's the teams, that's the lifestyle.
I got recruited by Kentucky. Small fact.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Play receiver, believe it or not. Yeah. Back in the day, I'm old though, but yeah. But I've been to visit. They do it big for the sports scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do it.
That Rupp Arena is really nice.
Yeah, they do it big. It's a scene. I mean, it's a professional atmosphere. It's probably better than professional atmosphere.
Yeah,
really,
it's
but
big.
In terms of scale, I mean, it's the size of Bridgetown.
Crazy.
So when you say farm, I guess Lexington, was it like outside of Lexington?
Just on the outskirts. It was horses and tobacco was kind of the family business that my dad was involved in. So I grew up helping with that, and probably at least at the time was something I didn't want at all in my life. You tend to kind of react to those things that you grew up around. And I liked the part of being outdoors and all of that, but knew I wanted to kind of go into a different kind of business, and so went a different direction than the farm. But it's my parents still live there. It's a beautiful place to go home to. I think the older you get, the more you sort of appreciate the way that you were brought up and the scenes that you were brought up in, even if it takes you a decade or two to kind of figure out that's the case.
So I love how you worded that. The point of this show is because I've never lived anywhere else than right here. So was there a point, obviously looking at the list of the things you've accomplished and the places that you've been able to go, was there ever a part that no disrespect to like your family or like people there, but like at what point did you feel like you're like, I don't want to say bigger than Lexington, like you were like a snob about it, but like that there's way more out there that you wanted to get away, and that's coming from someone who's never gotten away?
I just sort of enjoyed going new places and meeting new people, and I think it sort of stemmed from that. I was first person my family go to school out of state. Went to Ohio for college, and then Chicago was sort of the regional big city from there, and so went there, and that was a bigger environment. And then I was fortunate enough to travel internationally a little bit with my family. Loved just seeing different places, different cultures, and got the opportunity to work in that environment and did that. And so, there's basically 15 years of movement in that direction. And then I got married in 2018. I had met my wife in Asia, but turns out she's actually from Brentwood. And so that's the isn't that wild?
Dude, I was not ready.
We were gonna get there. That's wild.
I wasn't expecting that. I won't tell you already, but that's cool.
No, that one got me.
And so then it was just sort of like rubber band back to this area.
Yeah.
We wanted to start a family and wanted to be closer to our parents, and we're like, okay, let's move back to the U.S. And then for a whole bunch of reasons, wound up in Nashville. And I was like, what were we doing? Why were we going to try to be back in the U.S. but still a plane ride away? Like the whole point was to get back closer to family, which, my family is a drive. They're in Lexington, but it's 3 hours. It's, it's an easy up and back.
Yeah.
And her parents are still in Brentwood. And so it's like, it feels a little full circle. It's not the exact same city, but comparatively to the other side of the world, like, it's just down the road.
Right. That's wild. Okay. So, taking you to Chicago, was it a position with Uber that took you to Chicago, or did you go there and find it there?
No, I was already there. I'd done a couple other things after school prior to Uber, about 5 years of work experience between consulting and finance. And I basically I was working for a private equity firm for which the trodden career path was to go to business school to go get an MBA after a couple of years. And I applied to a bunch of business school programs, got rejected from every single one of them. And so then kind of got forced into this, like, what do you actually want to do? Because at some level, going back to school is a great thing, but you still have a decision to make on the back end.
Yeah.
And so I just sort of like short-circuited that step, not necessarily because I wanted to, because I was forced into that position, which turned out to be a massive blessing, because then, wound up joining a little company called Uber at the time as the 25th employee to start Uber's operations in Chicago. And, then the next 7 years, including a move to the other side of the world, happened.
That kind of actually answered my next question, because on your resume, it looked like there were really, like 7 years that you went from like a regional, like, manager, I'm guessing customer service of some sort, to head of it all of China and VP of like global operations on the Uber Eats side. Like, I mean, how were you able to climb that fast?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is right, which is to say, benefiting greatly from just the growth of the company. Obviously you got to do some things right on your side, but being in those high growth environments, and there's a whole bunch of different things like that, right? In every type of discipline. But
that's in the beginning.
There were 25 when I got there, and there were 25,000 when I left.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, like
in the world?
Two orders of magnitude.
Did you have like in all your consulting and stuff? Like, did you have an idea that this was going to blow up?
No.
That was my next.
I was just assuming that it was like, this is going to be fun for a year, and then I'll be looking for a job again.
Did he know something we didn't know? Like, this thing is about to blow. I got to stick to this. You know what I mean? Like, but nah. Just doing what you was doing.
No, people thought I was crazy. They thought I was leaving a private equity job to work for a taxi company.
Well, in the beginning though, because I remember getting Uber out of state.
Yeah,
it might have been Chicago. This was like early on.
Right before it was in Nashville. Probably.
Yes, it wasn't in Nashville.
Yeah.
But I was visiting Chicago in maybe 2016, and was going somewhere, and there's a bunch of work people there. You know what I mean? Like, it was an event at the hotel, and I see black cars just keep rolling up because
how are people accessing this? Yeah.
So we got on the app. I was Uber. Never knew it. And then like, oh, this is not in Nashville. Like, no, I hadn't made it there yet. No. To my knowledge, I guess. So, and if it did, no one was using it to the extent they are now. But I thought it was small. But in the beginning, though, it was, people, I guess, thought it was just that. And fast forward now, this thing is blown up.
That's wild to get in on something that early that blow up like that.
25 to 25,000.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah. When did you start getting into Ironman stuff?
I met it was like a boyfriend of a friend of mine or something in Chicago. This guy was a little older, and he was doing Ironmans, and I had figured out that I both liked to run long distances and was like pretty good at it in college. I did my first marathon in college and ran a couple through the first few years, and then it just seemed like an interesting next challenge to add in some of those other types of disciplines, to add in the bike and the swim.
Yeah.
I kind of did like one. I never did a full Ironman. I did half Ironman was the longest I did, but I figured out that one of those was enough. Like, I didn't really like swimming. And I have a funny, like, sort of early cold water story from that.
Yeah.
But it felt like an interesting way to kind of challenge my body, challenge my mind. I had gotten used to the feeling of kind of pushing my limits a little bit through marathons, and did those in a couple different courses and goals, and so the Ironman was kind of a next step from there. But I also realized it was sort of, like I said, I found that kind of outer boundary of like, that's enough, like, more than going the full Ironman distance was like more training time than I was willing to give up with a combination of like personal life, social life stuff plus work. And so it kind of felt like I'd found the outer boundary of like what I wanted to push within that domain.
For those who don't know, like, what distance is the bike? Is the swim? Like, people that don't know, like,
yeah. So the half Ironman that I did is you start with a mile swim. It's like 60-ish miles on the bike, and then it's a half marathon. So
which
then the
is
full
like
Ironman is
13 point what?
13.1 miles.
13.1.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And then the full is twice that, right? And so
No.
which means that you spend forever on a bike. It's 120 miles on a
Dude,
bike.
that is like crazy.
And then, you know, you obviously finish with
Just get an
marathon.
Uber.
So
Yeah, I mean,
it's a lot. I mean, I
What?
think to a greater degree than it just struck me as like that's a lifestyle. Like if you're going to do that sort of thing,
you're right. Yeah, you're
like
right.
your social life is with other people that are training
The
for
road.
that. Yeah, it's like you and your bike and the couple people on a bike next to you.
Yeah.
Like you kind of got to go all in on that aspect of life. And I just kind of never was really willing to be that, like, I don't know, you want to call it one dimensional, you want to call it focused. I'm not sure what, you know, it's not a derogatory point. I have a tremendous amount of respect for people that are able to do that. It just wasn't for me at that stage of life.
We'll obviously come back to this, but when you started getting into like marathons and transitioning from marathons to the Ironman, what was your knowledge and care for recovery for your body at the time?
None. And, you know, I've reflected on this a lot, how much of this is the age you are versus the sort of era that we're in now, right? Like you guys probably get a sense of this with your clients. My sense is when you're in your 20s, like you kind of still think you're invincible. Like it's till you get closer to 30 that you start to feel age in your body is my recollection and what I kind of experience when talking to other people. I'm 41. And so I don't know, but I also think 15 years ago, this wasn't talked about, right? So I'm not sure
not to this degree.
Not to the degree that it is now, where I think that when I do meet people that are in their 20s and, you know, really pushing themselves pushing their bodies competitively, I think their recovery is much more prominent, you know, in 2025 than it would have been 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
Sure.
Without a doubt.
And so I think that's one of the reasons you start to see. I mean, we were talking before we came on air, right? Like you're getting like a sauna delivered today.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the reasons you're starting to see these modalities of hot and cold. And there's other ways to recover, of course, too. You know, the conversation around sleep is totally different today than 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But I think you're starting to see those things show up in more settings, you know, being prominent enough to support a dedicated setting like Framework, but also showing up as like secondary modalities and components of being a member of your gym or other types of
it's almost like
studios.
Like a checklist of like being like a legit gym or not. Like
some people won't go just because you're missing this.
Yeah.
Or they don't care about I'll get a great workout, the trainer's great, the environment's great, but they don't have this, so I can't visit it, which it's only in this era, right? You and like no, back in the day, no, it's no way. I'm coming no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
So I think there's a big point. You seem to be really comfortable, like you said, like finding those limits. I've said it on here. I say it in my gym a lot. Like people like the idea of like romanticizing, like pushing the limits. But in order to push your limits, you have to know where your limits are. So you really have to find them. And the people that find them find that way to thrive, not just in fitness, but in business, in personal relationships as well. So I don't think that that's a coincidence that you enjoyed the challenge of long distance running and then looking at your professional resume.
Yeah.
When you're talking about getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, and finding limits and things like that, as you were climbing up that corporate chain at Uber, going from like a regional manager to taking the steps up, what was it always like, yep, I want to do that, I want to take that next step, I can do it? Was there ever like some fear of like, I'm biting off more than I can chew? Like, what was that experience like to not just take those steps, but obviously seemingly like thrive at each step you took?
Yeah. I mean, I think a really great way to go through life is just optimizing for something that feels like the most interesting experience you can have, and at some level, the most difficult thing that you could choose, right? Like, if you have a set of choices, 2 jobs, 2 things that you could train for, whatever that choice set is, choosing the one that feels a little more challenging or a little more different than what you've done before is sort of, I guess, the approach that I took. And it doesn't mean that they all work out. Like you mentioned this company I worked at Ready, really interesting ambition. The idea was bringing medical care to the door. So basically like in-home care, think about like the doctor riding around on horseback, back in the day or whatever. Like I always thought it was kind of messed up that we asked sick people to travel. Like that's kind of weird, right?
You don't think about it like
so
that.
it's like Uber Eats for a doctor.
Yeah, it was bringing medical care to your door, right?
Yeah.
Like you wake up, I mean, there's like an urgent care version. You're a generally healthy person, but like you wake up sick.
Yeah.
But there's also people that live with, chronic conditions that every day they feel bad. And, they have repeated doctor's appointments. So the idea with Ready was bring that care to your door, but it's really expensive for a doctor to drive around. So we would use an EMT or a paramedic, which are super high quality and really trained to go into a whole bunch of different settings, but they don't have the depth of training of a nurse practitioner or a doctor or something like that, who we had on telehealth. So we combined the EMT or the paramedic who would drive around, come to your door, lay hands on you, run tests, see the setting that you sit in with a more highly credentialed clinician who would be on telehealth. And the idea was strike this balance of cost and quality hands-on care. So anyway, that was the context of the business. Great idea.
I've done some telehealth stuff, and I'm like trying to explain to the doctor what I think
it's
it
like
is.
you
And I'm
just-
like, it does this. It sounds like
you need some diagnostic, you need some labs, some things that have to be done, right? So anyway, that was the idea. Great idea. Company didn't really work out. I think that was an example of me choosing something that felt really interesting, felt really difficult. I have no background in healthcare. Didn't really go well, right? So I think you have to be willing to like accept some things aren't going to work out because you're going to go into situations that are more difficult where you have less experience, maybe not as good of decision making to go into it. But like I'm super grateful for that experience because I think in a lot of ways, like I learned a lot, but also I think it sort of started nurturing some of this interest in framework and the way that we've positioned the brand relative to health that I don't know if I would have got on the same path with framework, but for that experience. So, that's kind of how I looked at it was like, I think that optimizes for like the most interesting things in life and pushing yourself but you're not going to win them all.
Yeah. It's very true. I think we obviously find more in failures. We talked about it from a sports thing. Like I've won games that were 60-0, and I don't know if I could tell you anything about the game, but there's some games that I've lost. I could tell you every play. I could see the film in my head.
Replay.
So
totally.
we definitely learn more from the failures,
Without a doubt.
Is there fear with that? Because talking to you, you sound so matter of fact of like you got a shot, all that. But like, is there like, especially like you have a family, like trying to make the best decision for your family as a unit. I'm guessing that there's still some fear that like if something doesn't work out that it doesn't just affect you and stuff like that. How do you deal with that fear?
Oh man, like if I can see how many people like show up to framework, hour by hour or whatever, like I was sitting here Saturday morning and like the morning started off slow and I'm like, rethinking every decision that I've made in the last 2 years that led me to this place.
Is that like an everyday thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's what I gotta ask.
Okay,
man. I mean, it's like every day you see like, dang it, man, what am I doing? And then tomorrow it's like, bet I'm back on top again. But then the next day it's like, is that just in a nutshell?
Anytime you have something, your own business or a goal that you care a lot about or whatever, I think particularly if you now you have the ability to track all this stuff so tightly, right?
Yeah.
Whether that means like the wearable on your wrist, you wake up and you see that you had a bad night's sleep, like that can really mentally mess with you. And I think there's arguments for why that's good or bad. Yeah. Same thing's true with business, right? Like it's probably not great that I can refresh my dashboard every 5 minutes and see what's going on. Great to have the visibility. Probably means sometimes you overemphasize that point,
I'm one
right?
of those.
It's like so I think you have to be really careful with that stuff.
No, like so I don't sleep great. I've got some nasal problems. So I mean we can talk about it another time, but self-induced nasal problems. But I don't sleep good. And so I started trying to wear something that would like tell me, and I would see that and it would tell me I didn't sleep good, and it's like I instantly was like tired again.
Just from the mind seeing that you didn't get a good
like
night's
you were
sleep.
reacting more to that notification than how you actually felt when you woke up.
Yeah.
Right. That's an example of like, maybe that's not great. Right. And so I think we all have these things where like you can over index on that. And I think it's just like, how do you keep yourself from spiraling? Like I can't figure out a way to stop myself from checking the dashboard, but I figured out ways to stop myself from that ruining my entire day and not getting anything done. It's basically like, it's too late.
Yeah, how do you do that? What are like tools,
The
practices?
balance,
the balance.
in there,
I think it's the difference between an emotional reaction and a logical reaction, right? Like I've kind of figured out that I can't stop an emotional reaction, but if I can realize that I'm having an emotional reaction and then put myself in a space to think about it logically, then I think you can get out of that cycle. And so some days, like I can just think my way out of that. Sometimes like a workout or a cold plunge, or if it's late at night, just go to sleep and wake up the next morning. Whatever those things that like flip you from one state to the next and not let yourself spiral, go to work. At some level, working on the problem feels a lot better than just thinking about the problem.
Sitting in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
100%.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so the gym I'm running now, it's my first business. I've worked like for myself as like a trainer and things like that. But as far as like having a business, brick and mortar, employees, things like that, this is my first go at it. We're 2 years in, but I mean that was definitely like I was refreshing the numbers. I was like,
oh, you drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, especially in the beginning because like I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
So then it's like I'm scaring myself over something I don't.
One of the things that I started telling myself, like pretty frequently, and I think after a year I actually started to believe it, was it's too late. By the time today rolls around, it's too late to work on how many people are going to walk in the door today. Yeah. Right? Like you can't solve that for today. You can work for next week or for next month, but once you have that mindset, then you can divorce the work that you're doing from the result that's happening right now. And it's like, all right, well, it's a slow Monday. I can't make today not slow, but I can make next Monday or the last Monday of March or whatever it is better. Yeah. And when you do that, then you can say, okay, let me focus on the work that's going to actually change that state in the future. And because it's foolish to try to change it for today.
But it's hard though. Cause
it's so hard.
Once you're in it, as we all know, it's like, I will stop whatever I'm doing right now to fix today, right now.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite, really.
Yeah, and then you lose the sight of.
Yeah, you get lost in that.
Next month.
Yeah, all of that. But those are great points, man. Because I think we all at some point in life, just as a whole, we got to learn how to let go of stuff we can't control.
Yeah.
So work on the control the controllables, right? That's from everything across the board.
Yep.
And let everything fall in place. And that's the way I've been trying to do it since. I started this entrepreneur journey.
And I think just recognizing that's hard.
It's very
three
hard.
of us sit here and like all know that's the right answer,
and
yet
so
fight this battle every day.
Every day.
Yeah. Every day. I mean, I'll probably.
We're all gonna go do the thing
when I leave
here
later
today.
Later today.
I did it before I came.
Yeah,
That's why I showed up the way I did today. But anyway, it's another story.
But I think a lot of it just comes down to fear.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes fear almost motivates people to find the limits, find failure. We've talked about that before. Like, I know that if I find what I like, what weight would just bury me in the bottom of a squat, I now know what that weight is, and I know how to like reverse engineer that to then not have that happen again. But to like find the failures of business, find the failures of marriage, things like that. Like that gets real scary. And we don't, I know I don't treat my life the way that I treat the weights on the barbell, but I succeed with the barbell. So there should be a carryover.
If I can talk about cold water a little bit.
Yeah.
I actually think that that's one of the biggest benefits is it teaches you to choose to go do something that's really uncomfortable and feels really hard to do.
Just validated everything I've been saying.
And practice it every day. And then when it's not like we live our lives in cold water, but we live our lives doing a lot of things that we don't want to do. Knowing that when we wake up in the morning, we got to do something we don't want to do. A difficult conversation with a coworker, an employee, a spouse, a kid, whatever it is. something hard at work, like our least favorite task. Like we encounter those individuals of the public that you would prefer to not interact with on the roads or in a store, whatever it is. And, the more that you realize that you can control some version of that, you can make it through that. Anything that lets you practice doing that, controlling your nervous system in that environment, I think is super beneficial. And so my version might be cold water, your version might be heavy weights, my version might be something else. But anything you do that practices doing something that you don't particularly want to do, and then that you can do it and you still choose to practice doing that, I think has tremendous carryover effects.
Discipline.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
I think well summarized.
Yeah, that was that validates everything that I've said when people ask me, because like I said, I had a plunge tub at the gym, and talking to people about it opens up the conversation, and I talk more about the discipline, like you just mentioned, way more than I talk about like physical benefits or recovery.
Totally, I think it's way more about practicing doing something hard than it's about reducing delayed onset muscle soreness.
Forced meditation.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that gets us to a good stopping point. We're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. And we are back with this episode of the Music City Mindset. We are sitting down with Allen Penn of Framework. We kind of covered where you've been, where you grew up, kind of the things, some failures, and things that taught you the lessons of how you're being successful with what you're doing here in Nashville today. So you kind of already mentioned a little bit of why you ended up in Nashville, but I'd be remiss to talk a little bit about your travels.
Yeah.
Obviously, I try to do homework to be prepared for the show.
Appreciate
that. You're the first person I've ever met that flexed that I just traveled the world with my wife on your resume. It's like president, COO, VP. Traveled the world with my wife. Like, you listed on there, like there's not a gap in your resume because you listed it.
That's a first.
But that's a pretty big flex.
That's
because,
a huge
it
flex.
says on LinkedIn, all 7
we
comments.
We talked about this.
43 comments.
That's funny that jumped out to y'all.
Yeah. Because like for me, obviously I would, I haven't traveled like that. And I'm sure that when you've done work in other countries like that, it could be beneficial to an employer or someone who wants you to consult and things like that. So I get the benefit of being there, but like anytime I took time off work and traveled, I didn't want to put that on a resume. So the fact that you put that on there, that was I took that as a flex.
But if I went to all 7 continents, I don't know if it was in that span or not, but the fact that you've done it, all it has to go on the resume. That's a flex.
I just think at some level, again, I've hired a lot of people in the last 15 years, and the conversations that end up being the most remarkable and I think tell me the most about somebody oftentimes have nothing to do with what you did in an office or
not at all
work setting, right? Yeah. It's like, is this person interesting? Would I enjoy spending a lot of time with them? Mm-hmm. What sort of crazy situations have you found yourself in? And can you turn that into a story? Can you turn it into a lesson? How did you solve a problem in that environment? And look, 15 months of travel with one person, particularly your significant other, I mean, I know at least you're married, you can imagine that creates some situations, some high stress situations.
Waking up in the morning, something is wrong, where we going this way to travel,
it's like nothing but dealing with problems, right? Not her, like just the situation.
It happens. Yeah, it happens. Yeah.
And we had just gotten married like earlier that year, and most of our dating life had been when I was traveling really heavily for work. And so I think we dated for like 5 years before we got married, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
But I would like divide that by 2 because like that's the amount of time we were actually in the same space. So I almost thought of it as like fast forwarding our relationship and kind of like catching up on those years in particular before we went to have kids. It was like, how can we deepen our relationship before, you kind of add this additional variable?
So was there a set plan? Like, we're going to hit 7 continents, we're doing this, or was it kind of like, let's just go?
Well, it would depend on which of the 2 of us that you asked. And so if Allen was traveling for 15 months, I would have, rolled up into the country with no plans and no reservations. If my wife was traveling for 15 months, she would have all 15 months booked before we left on the first day.
Yeah.
And so we kind of met in the middle on that point, like, planning ahead enough. And to be fair, she is right about this. Like if you want to go on certain tours or get into certain attractions or eat at certain restaurants, like you can't just like show up and be like, hi, I'm here. Like reservations are a thing.
That's my problem.
And but I also like
who I am.
Well, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work at all.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me. I like leaving a little bit of room for serendipity and things to just kind of happen too. And so it was a compromise.
When I talk to like people that have been like CEOs and like things like that, like of not quite to that extent of you, but like I would have almost assumed it would have been the other way around. That like you would have been like the planner,
I think in my head, so I started when I was in college, and then shortly thereafter, like I was spending effectively all of my money I was like saving for traveling. And so like at 22, I went to Turkey by myself. I went to Panama by myself. I went to Colombia by myself. So I really enjoyed traveling solo, backpacker style, hostel, unplanned, like roll up in country, nothing planned, etc. I think at some level I was still trying to connect with that phase of my life. Like in my head, that was travel, and it made me feel young, maybe a little bit in some respects. And so I think I was like hanging on part of that through this period. Even though I'm like a little more planful in the rest of my life.
I was going to say, is like your office brain, is that like itemized down to the hour, all of that? So is this like the exact opposite?
Yeah,
of,
it might be a little
balance?
bit of a vacation from that, so to speak.
I'm gonna say this is time to let loose.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just kind of do your thing in this phase of your life. Yeah,
So-
I get that.
I'm sure we could have a whole episode just on 43 countries, 7 continents, but like best and worst.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best is just the thing that makes you feel the most like you're in a foreign place and in a foreign situation. Like
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable, disconnected.
Yeah. There's a theme
The
with
ability
you,
to
Alan.
take a vacation from your phone. Yeah. You're pulling out some good themes here that I hadn't really connected the dots on. So we wound up on the east coast of Greenland. I don't know like how your geography is, but Greenland sits off the east coast of Canada. So you go east of that, you're sort of on the Iceland, Europe side of Greenland. But that part, the west side was close to Canada. And so a bunch of, people immigrated to Canada and then they immigrated over there. The east coast was super difficult to get to, rough seas. And so it was like the mid 1800s before Europeans ever showed up there. So you basically had like the native Inuit population there. It was less than 200 years that there'd been anybody else there, and not very many people. So the culture had really persisted. Like we rolled into a town and there was a whale carcass sitting in the middle of town, and people would like hack some of that off to feed their sled dogs. Cause then in the winter, when the ocean freezes over, that's how you got from town to town. This is 3 years ago. So like settings like that, you're like, this is a very different place.
What do you do when you like? How did that go? Actually,
it was fascinating. We were hiking around between these small towns, and your phone doesn't work, and the scenery is beautiful, and you're outdoors the whole time. I mean, to me, that's kind of the list. Like, can you spend most of the time outside? Are you seeing something that's beautiful or interesting? Are you learning something about history or culture? And does the setting force you to like not keep up with what's going on back home or in the news or on social media or whatever we could all use a break from.
And then you just stumble on a
whale carcass.
Yeah.
It's like Viking territory.
The community is just very much part of it.
Yeah, very much so.
Wow. What's a place that's like on a short list? You and your wife, kid, like gonna go back? Like,
so my wife and I are big scuba divers. So when I lived in Singapore in Southeast Asia, well, when I first met my wife, she had learned to scuba dive, and she basically told me from our first date that if it was going to work, I needed to learn how to dive. So like before our first vacation together, I was traveling for work and I had to like scurry off and get a scuba certification so that she'd like let me go on vacation with her. But that then became an activity that we could do a lot together. It was something, cause she's very fit, but she's not as much of like a go do an endurance race or, like that's less something we're going to do together, but it's something that we could do that's like outdoor, that's active. That's like a joint activity that we both really enjoy. And I think those are really important in your relationship to like find those things that are, hobbies that you can do, particularly for a long time. Like, I mean, you can be, old and out of shape and still scuba dive, like well into your 70s and 80s. And so, I think it's something that, will be like a lifelong hobby of something that we both really enjoy doing together. And so we did several of those trips while we were traveling. And, I think we've got 2 young kids.
Like this episode, be like, I told you, because she loves scuba diving.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I've never
I got her back on this. You need to get into it.
See, there you go. Right. You outnumbered right here, but.
What was Antarctica like?
It's incredible that you have a large landmass that's uninhabited. To me, like that was my takeaway. Like in a world where, it just feels like humans just sort of swarm into available territory. I mean, obviously the conditions are the primary reason for that to be the case, but it is fascinating that you can have a large area of land that is just truly unspoiled. And the efforts that are gone to, I mean, the distance is like the first reason this is even possible, right? Like it's far, it's hard to get to, but
what is it?
So you almost exclusively go by boat. Basically it's like a cruise, right?
Yeah.
And so, but to get off the boat, your clothes and shoes are inspected before you can step on there, because there's this goal of not allowing contamination onto that area. So like you got on land in South America or Australia, or there's a variety of places you can start from. You might stop at an island along the way, walk around, whatever. You have to go into a room and like shower off and scrub off your shoes. And then they look at those person by person on the way off of the boat to keep from bringing seeds or organic material or anything like that from one place into that environment.
So you don't upset that environment.
So you don't upset that environment, which is, I just think is a really cool thing to see. Like I'd never experienced that anywhere else. It's called biosecurity.
Yeah.
And it was something that like I appreciated the effort that, basically for a cruise line to be able to get a permit to do this, they have to show that they follow these types of processes. Right. And I just really respected that. I thought it was interesting to try to maintain that like pristine environment.
For contaminants coming back into America.
There's not a lot of places where that's the case. You'll see this with some islands, right? Like if you go to Hawaii, they're going to be a little more strict than if you're flying to another state. So Australia is notoriously very strict about what you bring in, bringing fruits and vegetables in. This is like, you get like a customs examination on the way in the door or whatever. So there's versions of this, but that was by far the most intense version that I've seen before.
That's crazy. Last question about this, food.
Yeah.
What area is like sometimes when you're like thinking about like, what are we gonna have for dinner? Like your mind almost like drifts off to like this street cart or a restaurant somewhere or something. Like what's been something that sticks out that you've eaten internationally?
Man, I think that the more that you sort of end up like eating the way that people eat day to day, and the less that looks like what you did, the way that you eat at home like is the most interesting version of the world. Adventurous for your stomach. Also. Yeah. I once had pig brain in China. And so like this was when I was managing a team in China, and I kind of saw it, and I think a lot of cultures have this where like, food is super important, right?
Yeah.
and your sort of willingness as a foreigner to engage in eating those things is like a way to gain some credibility.
It's your acceptance. They like, oh, this dude.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm like this
with
white dude from the U.S. that shows up in China, and I don't speak a lick of Chinese, but I felt like it was a way that I could get a little bit of credibility. But like, they're like, oh, here's the pig brain. I'm like, great, let's go. And there's a lot of cultures around the world that eat, in things that we would consider fairly odd, right? Yeah. Like it's all regional. That's probably fairly high on the list of things I've eaten that many have not. I got a few others on the list, but
pig brain.
Pig brain.
What about intestines, right?
Yeah.
Chitlins.
Yeah. But we got some weird stuff down here.
Well, it's funny, it's like, okay, so here's a pig, right? And depending on who you're talking to, like eating the foot or the intestine or the brain, like all of that's going to seem like really weird or really normal.
People like a snout, like
cheek, snout, like
well, especially
ear.
down here, like barbecue, the rooter to the tutor.
It gets
but
crazy.
Like, I mean, we ain't talking about brain.
No, I ain't talking about the brain. No, that's a class all by itself. I don't care how we slice that.
No, that's crazy.
But I think it's a fun way to learn a culture and experience. Your food is just, I don't know. I really enjoyed that aspect of traveling because what sounds super weird in one place is like everyday food somewhere else.
So, and I think that's a good segue. So after all of that, family is what ended up bringing you back here. Yeah. First off, in China, eating pig brain, where were you that you just happened to stumble upon someone from Brentwood?
So my wife and I went to college together. We both went to Miami University in Ohio. And she is first generation born in the U.S., Taiwanese American.
Okay.
So she and speaks fluent Chinese. So career-wise, she moved to Asia a few years before I did. We were like,
did y'all meet
acquaintances in college? Like I dated a roommate of hers or something in college. Gotcha. One of these like same circles, but not really knew each other. But I think we were connected on LinkedIn. And so when I moved to Asia, she had already moved there for work, and I was trying to find anyone I knew on the continent, which was like a list of 2, of which she was one. Yeah. And so, finally we connected, and, my only thought was like, it's fun to see somebody from home when you're far away.
Yeah.
And, have some either common people or places to talk about. And then sort of one thing led to another, and we started dating and so forth. But, she grew up in Brentwood, was probably like the token Asian kid in Brentwood High when she was there. Obviously the city's become a lot more diverse since then.
Yeah.
And so when we were moving back to the U.S.,
it
was like, let's start
in China.
Yeah. She heard about my pig brain.
Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna pull up. Hit Ellen up.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So we moved here Valentine's Day 2020. Roundabouts, which
great time.
I think everybody knows what happened a few weeks later.
Yeah.
And that's probably the reason that we stayed here. Like our intent was we were going to move to New York or probably a larger city because I thought I would be working for another tech company. I would need to be in a city that had more of that happening. And of course the pandemic changed all of that, from remote work to like our perspective on travel and ease of travel. Like it was just a moment in time where it made sense to not be far away from family. So and just like made staying put wherever you were kind of make more sense. So we were already here, and so we stayed. And I think we, but for COVID, we might have gone ahead and moved somewhere else. But we both stayed and now, obviously I have a business here. She actually runs her own business in Nashville as well. And so, I think we're pretty rooted at this point, and love the city or close to family. Like it checks so many boxes.
I see, that's awesome. So essentially we did all of this talking to get to the point of this podcast is to look at someone like you that it seems like you literally, not even metaphorically or hypothetically, you could throw you anywhere in the world. And I feel like you have some skills that you could thrive there. You've ran businesses internationally, things like that. So then to see that you're not from Nashville and all you've done all over the world, that you could literally just choose to go and be anywhere, and you chose here. And I just think that that's really remarkable, that it can have that kind of charm of the city of, yeah, it was the pandemic and things like that, but like that you're now enjoying being comfortable to stay.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I had never lived here before, but it'd been 15 years since my wife had, and she lived here in the lived in the suburbs and was in high school version of things, which is obviously very different. But, you know, I think we were both expecting that we would have to trade off a lot more from living in like large global cities to living in Nashville than what actually turned out to be the case. You know, there's so many people moving here from so many different places. And, you know, both of us sort of grew up in the South. Like I grew up in Kentucky, she grew up here. Like the city, for what it probably always has been, you know, my dad's had country music on the radio from like the time I was born, you know?
Right.
And so like culturally that felt familiar, but you know, the evolution in the last decade or whenever you want to start it, of people moving here from, you know, certainly all over the country, you know, the airport getting flights to different countries, like all these things are moving in the direction that I found really appealing. So when we like kind of evaluated, you know, once the fog of COVID sort of lifted and you're like, okay, like we can actually choose now, there was no reason to go anywhere else. You know, it's centrally sited relative to the rest of the country. I've been thrilled by how many of my friends that live in other cities actually come through Nashville and enjoy being here, want to come here to visit. Like I thought we were kind of going to be out of the way and we'd never see anybody unless we traveled, and people love coming here. Like I think that, you know, I've just been, you know, incredibly grateful to be here. I think the city has so much to offer.
I love that. What an endorsement. So now we've gotten all the way up to framework.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the beginnings of it. Why the name framework for what it is, when, you know, your competitors kind of hit the nail on the head of like, it's a sweat. It's a, you know, this, you know, just from the name, you might not know exactly, you know, what it is. And let's talk a little bit about how it started. You launched this business through WeFunder. Is that correct?
A little bit. Yeah. So I got, once I left Ready, I was sort of, turning 40 and having our daughter, who's now 2.5, had just been born. And so that was sort of the life stage I was in. I left the last job I was at, was trying to figure out professionally what was next, hitting a milestone kind of birthday, and having a kid. So just like that was the backdrop of the headspace, which kind of put me in like a longevity, health.
Yeah.
You start doing the math, like you're going to be 60 when the kid goes to college.
I'm the same way.
You're going to be how old with grandkids? Like, you know that math that I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm in the same boat. Yeah. My daughter's a 1.5, so she'll be 2 in August. I'm 43. So
yeah.
We're in the same
exact
boat.
Same.
Yeah.
So I think that like that was the backdrop of my headspace. And somebody had sent me a research paper on the health benefits of sauna. And I like enjoyed a sauna. I'd been in a sauna. I never really actively sought it out or felt like it needed to be a part of my routine. And I was also in a headspace where I was like actively adding routines to try to like make that longevity math as much in my favor as possible. And I started just honestly looking around town and not quite finding the experience that I wanted and I thought was possible, which was sort of a combination of like fulfill the parameters that deliver the health benefits, meaning like a traditional sauna that gets to 180, 190 degrees, like hot, because that's where all the research is grounded in, and is a more social, community-based experience. And so those were like two of the pillars in starting Framework. And, you know, one thing sort of led to another, and you know, we launched a temporary location, and then now our main space in Wedgwood, Houston. But, you know, to your point about the name, I think it also goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, it's not necessarily about the sauna or the cold water. It's about the sort of framework for your day, for your life, for the way in which you approach challenges and problems. And so I wanted the brand to be sort of big enough to communicate that, you know, while delivering that all through the modalities of hot and cold.
So that's like for like athletes or clients that I train, like, you know, your weekend warriors, your just gym population people recovering from any type of surgery, rehab, or just want to stay active and take it to the next level. Like, you can take care of all of those needs. We come to Framework.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say most of our members and most of the people who walk through the door may not even check any of those boxes.
Yeah.
Like non-gym people.
Totally. You know, we have the crew that like they limp in the door because they've just come off the long run or the heavy lift of whatever that they've been in, or they're recovering from an injury or things that hot and cold are like objectively very great for. We get a lot of people that are like, I work at home all day on Zoom by myself. I get to 5 o'clock and I want to see somebody else and I don't want to have to go to a bar. You know, like that's the need space that they're filling. Or I want an alternative kind of date night. You know, we kind of led in talking about date nights, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, doing something different together, something that challenges you both, that kind of creates something new to talk about. We do a lot of team and corporate events. People that are looking to do team bonding or team building in a different kind of setting. You know, all these things that sort of are almost like another concentric circle out from the population that you were describing. You know, I just think that these, because it's suitable for everybody.
Right.
Like next to no one is counterindicated from a sauna or a cold plunge. It doesn't require any kind of baseline fitness. It doesn't require any experience. There's not a lot of things in fitness that are like, and you can talk through the whole thing. So it's a social experience at the same time. Like it's really tough to think of another type of fitness activity that has those characteristics. You can talk through the thing. Like imagine, because you're straining too much, right? You're out of breath from a run or a lift, or it's just like you're gonna talk in the middle of a yoga class, like chat with your friend. It's kind of weird. But you're gonna get a zone 2 cardio workout sitting on your butt in the sauna, being able to socialize with the person next to you, and really challenge yourself for a couple minutes in cold water. And I think that's what sort of the constellation of things that makes this a little unique is.
Interesting.
Sounds challenging too, though. Like I'm just thinking in my mind, like I remember getting in the tub after practice.
In the aspects of date night, like what are the hours? Is it like accessible? Like, is there times where you just can't get in as members?
Yeah, so we since we've opened, we've steadily been expanding the hours. We're now open 7 to 7 during the week, 8 to 6 on the weekends, 6 days a week. So steadily kind of extending those hours. I think there's totally a nighttime use case for this as we step deeper into the social experience around it. But we have the before work crowd. You know, you can kind of think of it as like gym hours in a lot of ways, right? Like you got the morning people, you got the lunchtime people, you got the after work people. Yep. But you know, it's Nashville, so you get a lot of people that work sort of non 9 to 5 type schedules, and you know, thus we're sort of open, you know, 10, 12 hours a day.
So something I have to ask, because I think you already mentioned, I kind of pick up on trends and things in common. Obviously my exposure with Heather.
Yep.
And Terry. So I've seen the pink beanies and the pink sandals and the stuff, things like that. Is why pink, and was that kind of a shot at Lyft with all of your experience at Uber, or like why did you go with that pink?
You're super perceptive, man. That's a great question. Not a shot. However, I will say a reaction. My observation at Uber was, I thought that Lyft did an incredible job branding themselves with that color. It was so distinctive.
That mustache.
Uber's color was sort of like black, like, you know, elegant, a little subtle luxury. Yeah. Kind of tied into the black car origins as we talked about. But like you don't spot it from across, and Lyft literally put pink mustaches on cars. I don't know if you guys remember that era.
Yes, I do.
I do.
Like, you know, I just thought just immensely creative and so on point marketing. Like I give them a tremendous amount of credit for that. And I was always like a little jealous because it was like, that's a fun color that people notice. And so I wound up with the brand color that we have, which I call punk, because it's actually a little bit of an off pink. It's a combination of pink and purple. So I combined the two words and called it punk. But the idea is that it's something that's sort of bright and distinctive, because our space is elevated, but I talk about it as sort of like the marriage of a gym and a spa. Like we have some of the wood and stone and water and a lot of these things that sort of feel characteristically spa like it's a nice environment. We got plants hanging down, all this sort of thing, but you're there to do something difficult. You're there to do hard things. And to me, the bright colors bring out that sort of active gym aspect. And so we have these sort of like, aspects of color and brightness to nod at that, so that when people come in, they have an active mindset, right? This idea that like you're doing something, not something's being done to you, right? You sort of receive a massage, you like lay there and, the treatment is done to you. You got to actively choose to get into the water, to stay in the water, to stay in the sauna. And so the bright color is really kind of that orientation, but yes, informed by that experience a little bit.
I was like, there's no way it's a...
Yeah. That's an awesome question, man.
Just a one-off. Like, it had to come from somewhere. All right, now we know.
So about the plunging. So did you kind of like want to get into it of, like you said, like your routine, your own longevity, and it just wasn't there, and you noticed in your brain of consulting that there's a hole, there's an opportunity for that? Is that an accurate assessment?
I just wanted to start doing it, and I couldn't find anywhere to go that sort of checked the boxes that I want. Or more to the point, I had to drive quite far, and there was a low amount of. I think when I started this, there were 2 traditional saunas that were accessible to the public in all of Davidson County. One is a place called Holiday Bath House in East Nashville. They do a great job, and then one was like one of the hotel spas that you could like book a day pass at or something, not really a thing that locals are going to do. So it was just like,
no, I wouldn't have even thought to do that.
Yeah. This was like, I figured it out cause I was like actively researching it. So, we could have a healthy debate with somebody who's a infrared sauna aficionado about the pros and cons of that. But like, I believe from looking at all the literature of the scientific studies that the health benefits require a certain temperature level. The health benefits that are commonly cited for sauna, which maybe just to recap, the CDC recognizes 7 chronic diseases, of which sauna has been proven with really high quality scientific studies to reduce your risk of 4 of them by double digits amounts: cardiovascular disease risk, Alzheimer's and dementia, hypertension, and stroke risk. Like these are heavy hitters, right?
Heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Heavy hitters. And we're talking 20 to 50% reductions.
Wow.
And so, you talk to most doctors and they will say like, if the benefits of sauna were contained in a pill, everybody in the country would be on it. It would be the biggest blockbuster, because there's nothing that we have that can move your risk by that amount. And I would say most people who walk in the door look forward to getting in the sauna. Almost to a degree, exercise would show similar benefits.
Yeah.
But I think most people dread their workout a little more than they dread sitting in the sauna. Like the sauna feels like a reward to many people, if not most. And so I think that's what's special about it. That's what got me into it. I just was looking to have that experience, couldn't find it, and was at a point in my life where I had sort of the desire and ability to start working on something new.
That's awesome. I'm glad I just had a sauna delivered.
I gotta start crazy sauna. I'm one of the frameworks.
Come on.
Let's talk a little bit more about the plunge, because it was introduced to me.
Cold plunge.
Yeah,
cold
like
tub,
ice bath.
Yep.
In sports, normally like after practice,
and so,
in college, you hear it in high school, but
we did it in high school.
Yeah.
My high school was at the time known for excellence in championships and things like that. So during the season, every Thursday night before a Friday night game, after practice, it was usually a walkthrough on Thursday. We would all jump. You had to hit like 2 minutes.
Yep.
In the ice bath before showering and going on. So it was kind of ingrained in me that it was like a shock to the body, physical recovery. So your body's is tip top for Friday.
Yeah.
And then now, as I've gotten older, there's more education out there and things like that, because that was a long time ago now. But it is more, I feel like there is more about like the psychological an emotional
Yeah.
benefits. Is that how you feel? Are there physical benefits, or are they just outweighed by the psychological ones?
No, the grounding of cold is good for inflammation. That's the historical use for athletes after practice, after physical activity, right? That's what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to knock down that inflammation that creates the delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. That's all very well sort of settled science, if you will, and still super valid. What I think was underappreciated for a long time is what you just described, which is the mental health benefits. Partly because nobody talked about mental health 10, 20 years ago, right? Thought about it. And, I think as it's become more popular outside of athletic circles, people started just noticing what happened, right? You probably were getting this benefit, but you were just focused on the fact that your legs felt better the next day, right? Like you sort of just weren't paying attention to what happened because nobody talked about it. Mm-hmm. But what we know is you get a massive boost in dopamine and noradrenaline. So like you are more focused, you're more energetic, you're more alert, is happening. And there's a huge change in your nervous system state. You move from the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. This is the way we walk around all day, right? Because somebody cut you off in traffic and you saw something upsetting on your phone and you had a fight with your coworker, your partner, your kids. Like we all walk around all like geared up and our nervous system really stimulated. And it's supposed to be the opposite, right? Like we should not be fighting or flighting very much of our day, right? Like something's gone wrong back in the caves and on the plains if you were like in that state all the time, right? That's what that was designed for in human evolution. Most of the time we should be in the opposite. We should be in rest and digest. We should be in the parasympathetic
I've never even
state.
Heard that.
And
rest and digest.
Yeah,
and that's what cold water does for your nervous system. It moves you from one to the next. And so I think that's what the combination of those two things, the dopamine plus the nervous system reset, is why people get out and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. I'm relaxed, I'm clear-headed, but yet I'm also focused and energetic. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's like a physiologically addictive feel. Like dopamine is an addictive molecule. And so we're going to want more and more and more of that. So you got to be careful a little bit what you're doing here. But you can trigger that on a daily basis. You can trigger it in a really healthy pattern where it almost spikes like some drug uses spike, but then has a really long tail on it instead of a really sharp drop off. And so that's like a multi-hour feeling that you're getting from the dopamine. You are knocking down any inflammation, in your muscles. So that's also happening. And then you're also getting this nervous system reset. And there's one or two other things that we're also sort of learning relative to insulin resistance through your fat cells and relative to your immune system that also happens. So I think we're going to continue to learn what all can be done here. But what's crazy is the recommended daily dosage is like probably 2 to 5 minutes.
That was my next question. Like, what do you recommend, like time frame
It's
wise?
really small. And so that's what I think is so powerful. Like, name me something else that you can do in a couple minutes per day that delivers those kind of benefits.
For that long, though, long-lasting benefits, what I mean?
And then that's before we even get to the point that we started off talking about, which is just like, it trains you to be comfortable being uncomfortable or be comfortable doing something you don't want to do.
For me, there's this like almost like overwhelming, like euphoric realization that like I am in control of my heart rate by my breathing. I have to breathe to control my heart rate. And when I can actually feel my breathing slowing my heart rate down to get comfortable in that plunging in. Cause I'm one of those, I'll just cannonball basically.
Not inching, not
no. I can't.
You don't slide delicately like a mermaid into the water.
No. I just go all the way in, get it done with. But it's that like reminder that like, because when your heart rate is spiking out of control, you feel out of control. But having that reminder that like, if I slow down and breathe, I am actually in control of my heart rate. And like, there's almost that euphoric like feeling of like, oh, I am in control. Because we do spend so much of our lives in fight or flight that it can feel like we're just kind of like navigating life under something else's control of the job, control of, money and relationships and, things like that, like that reminder that you are in control, I think is like very, very empowering. But we also mentioned that like, gyms, I'm part of the problem, are now offering cold tubs and saunas and things like that. Majority of the people I'd say have a gym membership, whether they show up or not and things like that. What sets Framework aside, like different from like the experience of being there, the guidance of how long to do what, alternating hot and cold, as opposed to someone who's a member of the gym that just can go in and just do it whatever they want? Like, what are you getting extra benefit to also go to Framework?
Yeah, I think increasingly what I've seen is people come because of the community. They like being surrounded by other people that are doing the same thing and sort of having the space to make that happen, right? So there's everything from like the sauna is big enough for 10 or 15 people to be in there at the same time. We have 3 of those as part of our, the session that you would get as a member. I've got a lineup of 5 cold tubs that increment in 5 degrees from 40 to 60, which then really helps you challenge yourself and step up and down in temperature. If you're a first timer, like we can start people at 60 degrees. I find that women, and there's some reasonable research on this, prefer water about 5 degrees warmer than men. You can challenge yourself by moving from one temperature to the next. All these things, we have indoor and outdoor option. So like the facility is sort of set up as you would expect, because it's the only thing we do. Right. The facility is set up to sort of accommodate a lot of different versions of this. And then I think, people are there to immerse themselves in that experience. It's just, it's the primary thing that we do. And I think in most settings, in a gym or, a yoga studio, extra room or something like that, it's going to be a tag on. It's going to be the secondary reason that people come. And so, everything from the amount of space dedicated to it, to the investment in that facility, to the number of people that are doing that alongside of you, those things are going to vary quite a lot between, the Framework version or a dedicated version and, where this kind of shows up as an additional component. There's nothing bad with it being an additional component. I think that's wonderful that, more and more people are going to have access to hot and cold, because I think the more that you start to dip your toe in that, you then start to say like, let me seek out different versions of this. Like that's what we find. We have plenty of people that have a cold tub at their house. They have a sauna at their house maybe, and yet they come because they want to see people. They want the supportive community around them while they're doing that. Or they want a place to meet people, right? This sort of idea of like a third space and a social gathering place that's a healthy one. They want to just be a part of a different community, another community.
Now, when you say social, we are in Music City. Is there already, because I haven't been there yet, to the new one, is there a bar there? Is there... like how social can we get? Can we do some shots and then plunge, or like?
So we, I would talk about social in 2 buckets. The first is in our primary experience. Yeah. We have 2 different saunas, each of which hold about 20 people on the inside of the building. And we run one of those as social and one of them as silent. Because a lot of times people show up and they want to meditate, read a book, be in their own space. And people want to show up with a friend, with a group, or meet friends. So I think that's the first version of social, is like which of those that you want to do, like within the confines of hot and cold. To your point, we also have a non-alcoholic cafe. And this is my pitch for you. Back to the beginning. So like along with this stage of life that I was in, where I was trying to get healthier, I dramatically cut back the amount of alcohol that I was drinking. I still have like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 drinks a week. But it's
what's your go-to at this point?
Wine.
Wine.
Because I think the non-alcoholic versions are not good. Whereas I think non-alcoholic beer is a fantastic product at this point. Probably if you like beer, you can find every variety in NA form that you find in alcoholic form. Including from producers like Giddens, any craft style that you want, fruit beer, sours, like all this stuff exists in an NA world now. It's great. And, it was like so good for my health and lifestyle to be able to interject that. There's also some really interesting non-alcoholic spirits and zero proof cocktails that you start to see on menus now. Like that's something just watching, restaurant and bar menus in town over the last couple of years. I think we've all observed this to start to be the case. And so I just wanted to kind of share that through the cafe at Framework, which is in the front part of our building. You don't even have to purchase a session or be a member to use it. So it's a standalone cafe accessible to the public.
That's cool.
And, we obviously have like an espresso program. We do coffees. We've got non-alcoholic beer and kombucha on draft. I worked with some local mixologists on zero proof cocktails that are bespoke to us. And what we call tea elixirs, which are basically like carbonated functional iced teas that are unique to us. A bunch of packaged products of like really interesting sparkling and adaptogenic waters. Basically just, we've got high protein snacks, Radish Kitchen, which makes great healthy salads. We're an outlet for them. So we sell their salads through the cafe. But that's kind of the second part is like, you can extend your session at Framework, and that social aspect of it too, like popping up to the cafe and have a drink, while you're there, a non-alcoholic drink. And also just making it easier to fit into your day, right? Can you cut out 15 minutes in line at Starbucks and come to Framework and get your coffee while you're there? Can you cut out the lunch stop, come to Framework on your lunch break, grab a salad on the way out the door? How, everybody's busy, right? How can we just like make it easy for people to get there and spend
really
45 minutes or an hour with us?
I like that. Yeah, I'm definitely.
And to your point, there is a trend of mocktails. Like there's a bar, Gramps, that does like a Twisted Tuesday.
Yeah.
Where they literally take every drop of alcohol and sock everything NA for an entire night.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that.
Yeah. Killjoy is that. So a lot of the times
awesome.
that are popping up as
doing.
non-alcoholic are also offering like CBD, THC options. Is that something that you...
We don't, but just because, I want it to be something also you could do and then hop in the sauna. And I don't know that I would combine, cannabis products with sauna or cold plunge.
That was my next
I would
question.
not.
Okay.
Or I would not encourage it at Framework.
Okay.
I don't have hard science to say that it's bad.
Yeah.
But I think that in general, you're working, we talked about this, right? Like a cold plunge is a pretty powerful product. Like you're increasing your dopamine by 250%, which is in line with caffeine, chocolate, and sex and cocaine. Like the dopamine aspect of what's happening in a cold plunge. So I think you just, like stacking some of those things is, I think, probably not great, and also just like unnecessary. Like you talked about how you feel when you get out of a cold plunge.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think I'm not...
want to experience as the chef intended, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I would sort of take it straight, you know what I mean?
And it takes away from the experience overall, you know what I mean, in my opinion. So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So is there like, you get guided, you get like guided when you get there?
Yeah, so we both,
as far as like recommendations, time frames.
Absolutely. So the first thing we ask is sort of what's your experience with this.
Gotcha.
And we've got people that they know what they're doing, they know what temperature they want, they know their protocols. But we're delighted to have that conversation with people who say, it's my first time. Like in a lot of ways, I like to say that we specialize in first timers because we have the warmer water that people can get in.
Yeah.
And the best science I've seen says anything 60 degrees or under is kind of same. You might spend a little more time in 60 than you would at 40, but you're not diminishing your benefits, and you're dramatically improving your likelihood of success. If it's your first time and you're dropping into 60-degree water, it's going to feel plenty hard. You're going to feel just like anyone else would getting out of a cold plunge, but you're going to actually stay in there long enough to be successful. And that's really the goal, is how can we make people's first time a successful one? And this is way more about cold than it is hot. Most people do pretty fine stepping into the sauna. So we sort of focus this in the cold. But we also run a discrete guided class at least once a week, where you can come and there'll be an instructor who's with you the entire time. Heather did some of this at Framework, and we have another instructor or two now doing this. So we do a weekday one, we do a weekend one. And that's a great one for folks that, want a little bit more coaching through the entirety of the experience. But, I would say the community is really supportive. Like, you will regularly hear a conversation in the sauna about like, all right, what's your tips? I saw you did this amount of time or this amount of or this temperature, how do you sort of handle your breathing in the cold plunge? Like the community ends up being almost like self-reinforcing in that regard.
That's awesome. Well, it looks like you built something really cool, and I'm glad that out of all 7 continents, you decided to do it right here.
You brought Antarctica back to Nashville.
Yeah, always. Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you guys.
I learned a lot here.
We can do the next version of this in the.
We should take it to the coast.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it. Yeah,
this will be dope.
We have to tighten up the content a little bit, Brian.
Yeah. I think that'll happen naturally when it's. But I appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you guys.
We can definitely do another little special segment there. I can't wait to check out the new flagship.
Yeah, amazing. Love to have you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. So if you like me, man, I know you love this content. Allen, appreciate you, man, for coming through. I will be in the cold plunge, believe it or not. So I will make sure I still IG that. I'm gonna make sure I pull up IG that so y'all can know it's real. But thank you for coming on. I love the episode. I know you did too. So make sure you like, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing y'all on the next one.
And for the love of Nashville, tune into the next one.